You're watching TVC Breakfast. Now let's move to our next discussion. Access to stable power supplies is important in every sector of the economy. It could be used to improve food production and conservation, better healthcare, and create more job opportunities, among others. It is vital in both private and public businesses. But when a country suffers from repeated power outages, it becomes a source of worry to its citizens. Since the beginning of this year, the country has experienced at least 5 power grid collapses, plunging many communities into darkness and crippling businesses. According to the Minister of Power, Aliyu Abubakar, the latest one, which occurred last Friday, was as a result of vandalism which disrupted the transmission tower between Akwa Ibom and Rivers States. What's the solution to this incessant power grid collapse? That is what we'll be talking about in the next couple of minutes. Joining me in the studio to answer this and more is the CEO of Anergy, Femi Adeyemo. It's nice to have you join me this morning.
Thank you for having me this morning.
Great.
Good morning, Lagos. Good morning, Nigeria.
Right. Now, when we talk about power grid collapse of the power in the power industry, a lot of people sometimes don't seem to understand the dynamics of grid collapse and all of that. This year alone, we've had it several times,
Correct.
back to back. In fact, just 1 week it collapsed, the other week it collapsed again.
Yeah.
But it seems we're still in the same place, because this is not the first, second, this is not the 10th or 20th time since 1999 that we've had a grid collapse.
Absolutely, and it will continue to happen. You can't continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. However, what I believe we can do, and I mean, to be honest, there are some activities that are already happening towards decentralization.
Okay.
Because what we need to do is decentralization.
Is that the solution to the constant collapse?
I mean, that's one of the solutions.
Okay.
Of course, I mean, I don't want us to go into the fact that we're not even generating enough, but let's park that.
Okay.
The one we're generating, we need to transmit it successfully and ensure that we're also able to distribute it to the last mile that ensure that you get power at home.
Okay.
But when we have instances like the last grid collapse, where vandalization in some parts of the country then affects several other generation plants, then we are in a bigger problem. And that is why decentralization is critical. We need to ensure that we're able to decentralize, and when there is any grid collapse, there has to be isolation. There can be grid collapse in Akwa Ibom, Ikotekpene, or wherever, and it will affect other generation. So that is very critical. Of course, there can be conversations around, now we're having renewable energy here and there that, I mean, is supposedly, and I believe, of course, I'm an advocate of that, that can help us get to where we need to be, but that is not happening fast enough. So indeed, one of the solutions to this is decentralization and fault localization. Whenever there is any fault, let it just be there. And there are technologies across the world that can make that happen. So it's a shame, really, that, I mean, vandalization in one part of the country, in a generation or a transmission area, affects others. We can't continue. Otherwise, there will be continuous.
All right. A few years ago, the president went into a government-to-government deal with, concerning what Siemens of Germany can do in Nigeria. I wonder how that is going right now from your observation, because the point there is the promise was that by December or end of 2022, we'll have had close to 12 hours of power generation and power transmission and power availability.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting conversation. So you're talking about the Presidential Power Initiative and the arrangement with Siemens, I mean, with the German government. Of course, I mean, I look at the documents when it was released, very robust documents. But the thing is, we need to continuously remind ourselves that we are in a very interesting economy, right? I'm not sure how much of the issue that happened last week that we had taken into consideration even into that framework, the Presidential Power Initiative. Of course, the speed at which, it was meant to deliver power to the people, it's not happening. And that is why I continue to be an advocate of decentralization. Yes, it is okay to spend a lot of money on, transmission and ensuring that, it gets better. But as we are doing that, we have to be intentional. Because, look at, again, the collapse. Are we sure that they're going to bring the people that made that happen to book? The answer, is probably no. If you look at other problems that we have and we continue to more or less window dress them. So, indeed, the Presidential Power Initiative, I am of the opinion that it is a step in the right direction. However, there has to be a parallel intentionality around decentralization. Generate and let people consume. I am happy with what is happening, around the legislations around states being able to generate their own power and consume. That is a step in the right direction. And we need to ensure that we more or less reduce the power at the center and let states begin to generate their power. And when they do that, let them use sources, so generation sources that we can control. And I'm talking about solar, wind, where it makes sense, and less reliance on fossil fuel.
In the generation, we've had some analysts who say that the power that is generated, if it is put on the backbone or
on the
infrastructure on the grid,
yeah,
that the grid cannot,
sure,
So if they make us understand, it means the infrastructure backbone is not there to even withhold.
Yep.
The current generation.
Correct.
So we hear of there's a lot generated that cannot be evacuated. So the evacuation is in relation to the capacity of the backbone that we have.
Absolutely, and that's exactly the point I'm making. As we're generating more, forget about evacuating it to the national grid. Let it stay where it is being generated and let it be consumed. Adamawa, Katsina, if it is, it's been proven that wind can work in those geography. Let them have hundreds of megawatts of wind and let them consume it there. If you want to evacuate that to the national grid, which national grid? The one with the PPI that we've signed that it's not seeing the light of the day? Or the one that some guys might wake up in the middle of the night and vandalize it and the whole grid will collapse again? We can't continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. Otherwise, I will be here in 5 years and we'll continue to say the same thing. I moved back to Nigeria 8 years ago. I told someone that if we don't change in 10 years, there won't be any difference. It's getting worse than what it was in 2013. So people need to just roll their sleeves and know that we cannot, it is stupidity, they said, or craziness, for you to continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. That's what we've been doing. That's why we're getting the same result.
Let's talk about the issue of renewable energy, that where the world is going right now.
Right.
And a lot of people, including you, have advocated that we should begin to consider renewable energy to diversify, our sources of energy. You mentioned Adamawa and Katsina in the area of wind. The same Adamawa also has the capacity for solar energy, as well as Borno State, as well as part of Taraba State.
Sure.
The Northeast seem to be very ripe for solar energy because of the sun.
Yeah.
Now, what would it take for us to begin to diversify? How expensive would it be if we have to look that way?
The cost, kilowatt hour or megawatt hour cost of solar farm continue to plummet. So it's really going down. Of course, currency devaluation and all of that is probably making us lose some of those gains. But it is happening. And indeed, see, all of this vandalization that we're talking about, some positive or plus for the government is some of these renewable energy activities already happening. However, not at the scale at which will make you in Lagos or Abuja or Port Harcourt feel it. It's largely in the rural communities. No disrespect to people in the rural communities, but the SMEs that they say is the bedrock of the economy, the youths that are meant to stay in Nigeria to fix our economy are living in droves because they don't have power in their home or in their offices. So if we continue to spend that money, I mean, there is a $350 million fund, loan from the World Bank that, for power, Nigerian power program that the REA is the one implementing it through the Ministry of Power. So we have, several universities and teaching hospitals that are on solar farms now, some 7 megawatts, some 10 megawatts. It's a good step in the right direction, but I continue to say that it's skewed more towards rural and university. We need to bring it to the center. Conversations around, REA should be rural, they don't want to be in the franchise area of the discos. Come on. We need to just call a spade and bring that to the center. So the cost, back to your question, the cost is plummeting. It is possible. And what I can tell you is by the time we decentralize, let us have power in Katsina that is serving Katsina, and let's see if someone will go there to vandalize. Why am I saying this? I have first-hand experience. 2015, 2016, we took a loan from Bank of Industry to build mini-grid in some communities. I tell you, people were asking us, won't they vandalize and all of that? In an instance, I think that was in Osun, where a trailer ran into a mini-grid and broke some poles. The people in the community they locked down the driver, called our head office, asked how much will it cost to repair, and they ensured that the driver paid. Because they know that if they don't do that, they will go back to 100 years where they use, they didn't used to have power.
So ownership is this.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Absolutely. So let's begin to have that decentralization mentality. We have a lot of problems. We've talked about the infrastructure on the transmission side, vandalization here and there. That decentralization will solve a lot of our problems. Cost makes sense because you don't have to transmit. You generate and you just distribute or just consume it where it is being generated. And that's why I cannot wait for that legislation to allow states and for even states to then go down and begin to allow local government to generate their power. That is the clearer path to us getting out of this.
Let's even assume that let's create a scenario where that happens. Would it still not require a lot of infrastructural, backbone to be able to? Because the point there is, up until now, within some local governments, there are communities that have never had electricity ever since the creation of the world.
Correct.
Right. So the point there is, we still need decentralization within, those communities, within the states and all of that. Wouldn't that also require some level of heavy investment?
It is cheaper today to do renewables than, the conventional power. It is cheaper, and when you localize it, transmission cost is not cheap. So what you are taking out is you're taking that transmission. So you mentioned communities, and that is already happening. Kudos to the Rural Electrification Agency on that. There is, several mini grids in Nigeria, several communities that had existed for more than 100 years have never had power, that with mini grid, they are seeing power now. So that is happening. But what I'm saying is, yes, that template is already working, but let's bring it to even a bigger. Let's move from 1 megawatt for a university to 100 megawatt to some states. And then with that, we have so much potential in this nation. It's painful to us entrepreneurs that are saying the word, move back home, and seeing us just sitting on the potential and not doing anything about it.
Now, as it is right now, in all of this, allowing private sector institution, whatever they are, generate their energy and use it and all of that. Now, when it comes to the issue of taxes and revenue from all of these generation, how does it work? If government has to, decentralize it, let everyone generate whatever. If you have the capacity to generate power within your school and all of that, go ahead. But how does government get back revenue from all of those?
Okay, I'll use our organization as an example. So we have 3 different business models. And one of our business model, of course, we don't have to talk about import duty. I mean, government is making money on that, but we have a model that we call energy. Of course, 3 models that we run today. If you have the money you want to buy outrightly, we won't say no. But we know that based on, again, the economy, disposable income and all of that, not so many businesses or homes can afford that. So we have what we call lease to own. You want to own the assets, you want to own the solar equipment, but you can't afford it today. You can pay over 36 months. Another option is you don't even have to buy at all. It's called power as a service. For power as a service, any business that is on power as a service in Nigeria today, there is tax that is being deducted and being paid to the government. So again, if we have power, there will be more businesses. People will be able to run for longer hours. They will generate more income and the government will make more money via taxes. So, I mean, we are an organization that, I mean, I know how much we pay on taxes on a yearly basis, even though we're a small company compared to, I mean, the bigger conglomerate. So indeed, when more power is being generated, the economy will more or less boom. And then, I mean, it's a no-brainer that the government will be able to generate more revenue. Because what's the opposite of that? Companies going under? Or the neighboring countries, I mean, inviting them, incentivizing them. I mean, I read in the news last week that even, I mean, some of our people are complaining. But hey, money, they say, doesn't, when you look at money, where will you get the best return? That's where the investors will go. So indeed, we need to put our house in order. And I cannot wait for some of those to begin to happen.
From this standpoint where we are right now, if the steps have to be taken regarding some of the solutions you have proffered, which will pay us more to start from? Because it is going to be very illogical to take everything at the same time, considering the resources at the disposal of government.
Decentralization. Decentralization. And you know the funny thing, I have 4 investors.
Okay.
The biggest business people in the world are equity shareholder in my company. I'm talking of the likes of Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and co. The investment is there. It doesn't even have to be government money. Private sector, private equity investors are just waiting to see a clear direction that will allow them to be able to invest and make their money back. But a lot of that is lacking. And that's why even, I mean, on the grid, Disco, nobody is investing in Disco. I mean, Genco, transmission, you see. But decentralization, the short answer to your question is decentralization with a clear policy, and for us to remove any form of policy flip-flop. Because even if you have the policy now, the investors will be looking, are they going to change it in 2 years or in 4 years?
That uncertainty
exactly.
doesn't...
So all of those are what we need to put in place, but decentralization hands down. Let states be able to generate their power. Let's start with states. We can't talk about local government now, but at least since conversation is already happening around states generating their power, let's start with that, with policy that will excite private equity investors to bring their money in. And I mean, that can happen overnight. This problem does not need rocket scientists to resolve it.
Well, that was what we thought when they say, this is not rocket science. Remember when PHCN was being, decentralized? It's not rocket science. Just bring in private investors and then take it over. But right now, we've been talking about the issue of government bailing out some of the companies that bought, all of those and all of that. And what do you make of that, though?
I think we did a lot of man on man in the last privatization. Yeah, I mean, without any apology. We need
But let us even assume that you are my friend, and then I'm bringing you to buy this, whatever the thing is, and then you have bought it. It's been how many years now? Are they not able to, lend the ropes on one hand, get the right people after several years of seeing the realities of what the thing is?
I was in Europe last week and I met with some investors and we had same conversation. What we need to resolve, at least on the distribution side, let government take away that 40% that government is sitting on.
Okay.
Let us have 100% privatization on distribution allow the distribution company to generate power. I mean, your headquarters is around Magodo. I mean, with what happened, Ikeja Electric and the premium power, let us replicate that. Let government, the 40% government is still holding on the distribution, let them let go of it. Let it be 100% privatized. Let the market determine. And the discos, let them generate their own power, and you see that things will change.
It's all right. Femi Adeyemo, we have to leave it here now. Thank you so much for your insight into all of this.
Thank you for having me.
Look forward to a brighter Nigeria.
We can only hope so and work towards it. We have to stop hoping and work and roll our sleeves and get to work.
Exactly. Thank you so much.